Hi, Michael. I'm John Horwath. Hey,
John,
can you
nice
tell
to
me a
meet
little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Michael Stump. I'm a SPCT and a SAFE Fellow working with Scaled Agile. Was working with a lot of organizations around the globe and helping them to scale up their lean and agile approach, which is amazing to work with so many organizations and see the challenges.
How long have you been in SPCT?
So that's actually a really good question. Since 2014, I think. It's now about 5 years. So I was in the first SPCT class with Scaled Agile. Right. So it's an interesting journey to see the whole growth of SAFE in general and see how many business results SAFE really creates and happy customers and happy people in those organizations, which really makes a difference.
And how long have you been with Scaled Agile?
I joined Scaled Agile in 2014, so it's almost 6 years.
Wow.
So
That's impressive.
It's an interesting journey.
And you still are smiling and happy and...
Of course, how can you not smile? We're here at the SAFE Summit. We have more than 2,100 people here, and they're coming back and they're sharing their stories, sharing their learnings, and that's really amazing.
So stepping back in time, what was your first Agile experience? What really started you on your journey?
It was actually a tough journey for me. I was a project manager, a line manager, a very traditional waterfall, and I had a lot of successful waterfall projects. So one of the things I've learned, it's really dependent on individuals. Whenever I had a good customer project manager and a strong project manager on supplier side, it typically worked out well. But it didn't scale, and when I had really larger programs and led organizations, we had delays. It was not clear what's going on with the requirements, and customer demands changed so much. Mm-hmm. So I had to change myself and learn more about this agile approach. And it was actually really step by step for me. I had a lot of fear of losing control. Right. What Agile is about, what is happening with that. How do I lead teams and organizations in that way? So I built trust step by step and saw how amazing results were created with that, and that really got me into the Agile world.
So what time, when was that about, and how did you start? I mean, how did you start getting those steps and incrementally improving?
I think that was around 2005 where I was doing more of that and using some of the practices. Maybe I was not aware of Agile at that time in detail and what it means, but I did some planning. I actually did some kind of PI planning in a way with people involved, long-term planning, short-term planning. And really got into that and then hired somebody in my team. So I was leading a large organization and hired somebody with that expertise to then experiment and get more learnings of how does this work and how can we improve with Agile at that point of time.
So you've seen a progression over the years from 2005 until 2019, right? So all those years, what's the common denominator that says here's why agile transformations don't succeed, or from a success standpoint they don't meet some of the expectations that people think? So what's the common thread in those transformation failures, if you want to say that?
It's actually a really hard question. I think it was different based on what time it was. At the moment, what we see a lot is, why are you implementing Agile or SAFE? Mm-hmm. That's one of the first questions when I go to an organization, because if the answer is, we want to be Agile or SAFE or our competitors are doing it, it's not the goal to be Agile or be SAFE. You want to achieve some business result. You want to know what is it you want to achieve, how do you measure it, and then also baseline it to really be result-oriented. And I think that language also speaks to a leader much more. And talking about leaders, I think it really needs leadership involvement to be successful. Otherwise, you have maybe one team or a couple of teams that are really good in doing Scrum or whatever Agile approach they are doing. And that's creating local optimization. And unfortunately, I've seen organization, really good Scrum team, but it slowed down the whole organization because what the development team created, support and marketing was not able to consume that. So not a system approach. And I think really having that more system thinking over local optimization made a big difference in creating real business results for organizations.
So what do we do to fix those things with, making sure it's not localized and leadership? How do we achieve a great transformation?
I think starting with leadership. We need to have leadership on board, and not only on board, yes, do it, also involved. And we need to be able to train them, because their behavior will change a little bit as well, and they are role models. So they need to understand, take away some of the fear, what's going on. And that's what I had in my journey as well. So training leadership and really think about the goals. What do we want to achieve? What are we doing it? Organizing around value end to end makes a big difference as well. So that helps leadership support, organize around value, and then help all the people to understand what are we expecting, because it's a different way of working. Right. If you're not showing how you can work in that area, how do I know what I'm supposed to do?
So do you see many transformations start at the bottom and go up, or are you seeing most of them start at leadership and work their way down?
So if you would have asked me that question a couple of years, I would have always said, start with the team, get some Scrum teams going, and then scale up. And my opinion changed a little bit, that you need to have leadership on board, and then you start with an Agile release train. And it's really about the impact. If you have one Agile team, 5 to 9 people, Scrum team, then you get certain results. But the real value is created when the teams are working together. And when you have an ART of 50 to 125 people, you make an impact in a company. You make a difference, and you can really prove, is it working or not? So having leadership on board, you want to have that, and then start on an ART level, not on a team level, and use the power of the group to learn and inject this PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, and adjust, to have continuous learning. And then we learn together as an ART and are growing that, and that's really a success pattern I've seen.
So I'm out there as a coach. I'm coaching a solution train right now, and I'm seeing a whole series of misunderstandings especially about Agile, but also about scaled Agile. So tell me, what are some of the common misunderstandings that you just go, how can people think that way? What are some of the things you see in the marketplace, and when you go out to companies, about what's the misunderstanding? Let's do it twofold. What's from an Agile perspective, but then talk about the scaled Agile framework. What are some of those misunderstandings you're seeing?
I think from a SAFe perspective, Scaled Agile Framework perspective, it is really, when do we deliver to the customer? So we have this PI, program increment cycle, which is typically 8 to 12 weeks. Right. And I hear a lot of people talking, we are only delivering at the end of the PI. And that's, I think, one of the biggest misunderstandings. We are not delivering at the end of the PI. We are not delivering at the end of the iteration. We try to create the continuous delivery pipeline. Whenever something is ready, should be accepted, should go to the probably production environment. And so that's one of the biggest misunderstandings I've heard so far. We develop on cadence, and I believe cadence is really important. 2 weeks cadence for iterations, and PI cadence about 12 weeks. That's for planning purposes. It doesn't say anything about when you release it to the customer. That's also one of the most powerful elements to a gift you give to the business side of a company. You can decide when is the right time to release some value to the customer. Right. So that makes a big difference.
I just had that same example happen where it's like, well, we need to release at the end of PI. We need to have a hardening sprint. It's like, well, all those things, even my hair curled and it's so short. But so what else? What other things are out there that bother you?
You brought one up, the hardening sprint. Early versions of the framework, we had the HIP sprint at the end, hardening, innovation, and planning. And there was a lot of misinterpretation that you do testing and integration in that iteration at the end. And that's not really the case. You want to have that on a continuous basis. But if you build an airplane or a car, maybe it looks a little bit different, and you cannot test everything out there in the field all the time. So how can we get as close as possible to the continuous delivery pipeline? So that's the other one which I heard a lot. It changed a little bit.
Yeah. So you're obviously international, and Scaled Agile is really. I'm being asked to teach classes in Singapore and India, all over the world, and it's a great thing for Scaled Agile. But there's probably things out there in the globe that you look around and you say, what are the 3 things that I could really be passionate about and change from an Agile perspective and really help move Agile and the Scaled Agile framework along? What are a couple of those things that you see out there?
I think Agile in general, it's really creating awareness and talking about the results. And I think when I look at the Agile community, unfortunately I see a lot of more competition out there instead of channeling the energy to the customer. Right. There are so many customers out there that need support, and if you channel that energy there, not having internal fights about what's the best Agile approach, really go to the customer, help them to understand how can we provide more value. I think that's something around the globe which will have a big impact if we channel all this energy in supporting customers and government organizations around the globe. That will make a big difference.
So when you look out like 6 months or 3 years or 10 years, I mean, let's talk about 2 things. Where do you see Scaled Agile moving to? And more importantly, how about you? Where do you see yourself in 3, 5, maybe 10 years out?
That's an interesting question, especially in relation to the SAFe framework. Right. And I don't know. The customers will tell us in which direction to go. And when we had SAFe version 1, it was a lot on team level and program level, not a lot of portfolio. And then over the years, we've seen that we need to add more details on a portfolio level. We learned that we need to add the large solution. We also learned from our customer that we don't need a separate framework for system engineering. We had this lean system engineering version of SAFe, and customers told us, don't separate them into 2 frameworks, build one together. And now with the latest version of the framework, which is SAFe 5.0, it's really about business agility. But what we do, we learn from our customers. They tell us what is the next big thing, where are the challenges, and then we move that forward based on the customer feedback.
So when I look at the Scaled Agile framework and it's been fantastic to be involved in these last few years, but especially because scaling up, right? How do you go to the portfolio level? And I look at originally it was very focused on development, right? And then you're right, scaling up to the solution train and portfolio. And with 4.6 coming out last year, which focused a lot on the portfolio, and now the business agility thing is talking a lot more about the entire enterprise, not just development. It is going to be interesting to see where things move in the next few years. Do you have any hints for us to say here's kind of where the customer focus is pushing the Scaled Agile?
I would assume it's really more business agility, end-to-end value delivery, and using SAFe as an operating model for business agility. And we at Scaled Agile, we are using SAFe to run our whole business. We are an Agile release train. We do PI planning. Everybody's flying to Boulder to the headquarters every 3 months. So we fly people in, we take the effort because we see the value. We have finance on board, we have people operations on board, we have sales, we have legal. Everybody's part of the Agile release train. And I think that's probably expanding more, really build these end-to-end solutions. And we also see that we have probably potential in the large solution space. If you build an airplane, how do you coordinate and how do you work together in that area? We have some great guidance already, but there's probably more to come.
How about you personally? What's your passion over the next few years?
So it's really helping companies to grow, and one of the passions is also helping smaller companies to grow and be successful and maybe apply some of these practices and principles there. That's also the market will guide where we are going, and I'm really excited to work here and support that journey.
I've worked at a small company and a couple of very large companies. It's interesting that everybody looks at scaled agile for very large companies, but actually the power and what you can get at a small company is it's remarkable, right? So are you seeing in the marketplace there's a lot of small companies starting to adopt SAFe now, or?
I would believe there will be more, and I think going back to how did we start, SAFe was designed for organizations where 50 plus people are working together. We started to use it when we had 20 people in the organization. We are now about 125, and it really helped us in the fast acceleration and growth process to integrate new people, to be aligned and to be able to support based on the customer demands. So I believe it's a very powerful approach for smaller organizations as well to grow and to deliver value to the customer.
Last year at the SAFe Summit in Washington, D.C., I talked to Dean about some of those things because I was at a small company that was adopting SAFe for the whole company. And it was great to hear him talk about how you guys had adopted it. It's one of those things like, if you're going to talk the talk, you better walk the walk, and it's an amazing thing to see happen.
And believe me, it's not always easy. We have the same challenges as larger organizations have, creating alignment, backlog items, working process limits. We are always learning, and that's a good experience for us as well.
Well, I can't thank you enough for your time. Thank you so much for spending time with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.